Hello, welcome to another video. Please like, share and subscribe for more amazing story. True God in Another Worlds, Tensura x Tbate, by Tempest_King_20. Chapter 61. Tension rising. Arthur Lewin Pavre's hand trembled as he knocked twice on the director's imposing oak door. The polished wood gleamed under the hallway's soft lighting, making the intricate carvings of magical creatures dance before their eyes. Not even a second passed before Principal Goodsky's soft voice floated through. "Yes, come in." As Claire pushed the door open, I noticed her shoulders tense. The morning light flooding the room momentarily blinded us, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the academy grounds. As our eyes adjusted, I saw Claire freeze mid-step, her breath catching audibly. Following her gaze, my own heart skipped a beat as I understood why. The director sat behind a massive desk of deep mahogany, its surface covered in neat stacks of parchment and glowing magical artifacts. She was facing two familiar figures, her classic wizard conjuring robes shimmering with subtle enchantments. She'd removed her pointy hat, revealing her silver hair tied in an elegant bun, and she gave us a friendly smile that didn't quite hide the concern in her eyes. Big Sis Aaliyah and Byron Wykes turned to us, their signature white outfits with a red ribbon running across their chest adding to their elegance and strength. The light glinted off their badges, marking them as lances. The elite of the elite. My mind raced, trying to piece together why they were here. Claire's grip on my arm tightened, her fingers digging into my skin. I could feel her practically vibrating with emotion as she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "It's the Lance Byron and the Lance Aaliyah, in person." Gently, I pried her hands off me, giving her an understanding smile. When I looked up, I caught Aaliyah's eye. She gave us a sweet smile and a little wave, which only seemed to make Claire more starstruck. Oh my gosh, Claire muttered under her breath, her face flushing a deep red. "They're even more impressive in person." The director cleared her throat, drawing attention back to her. "These three students are members of the disciplinary committee, and some of the most promising mages this generation has to offer," she said, her tone proud as she introduced us, though her words were more directed at Lance Byron. Byron's piercing gaze swept over us, his expression unreadable. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back under his scrutiny. Claire fidgeted beside me, her hands twisting the hem of her shirt. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and tried again. "It's nice to meet you, sir, ma'am. My dream is to one day become a lance." Aaliyah's smile widened at Claire's words, her eyes softening with encouragement. "That's a noble goal," she said, her voice melodious and kind. "Keep working hard, and who knows, we might be colleagues someday." Claire's eyes widened, and I could practically see stars in them. Really? You think so?" she stammered, her voice cracking with emotion. Byron, however, seemed unimpressed. He turned to the director, his voice curt. "As I was saying, please make the appropriate measures as soon as possible. We can't afford any distractions." The tension in the room thickened at his words, and I found myself wondering what exactly they had been discussing before we arrived. The director nodded with a smile and dismissed the two lances. As they prepared to leave, Claire's excitement turned to panic. She looked like she wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Aaliyah paused as she passed us, placing a gentle hand on Claire's shoulder. "I will be rooting for you," she said softly. Claire's face lit up like a firework. "Thank you, Lance Aaliyah. I won't let you down," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. Byron brushed past without a word, his cold demeanor a stark contrast to Aaliyah's warmth. As the door closed behind them, Claire let out a long, shaky breath, looking both elated and overwhelmed. "I can't believe that just happened," she whispered, her eyes still fixed on the door. "Did you see how amazing they were? And Lance Aaliyah said she'd be rooting for me." The director's voice broke through the moment. "Now, my secretary mentioned something urgent has transpired." She gestured towards the plush couches near the window, her tone shifting from proud headmistress to a more nurturing, concerned listener. "Why don't you take a seat and tell me in detail? I have a feeling we have much to discuss." As we moved towards the seating area, an unsettling feeling gnawed at my gut. The plush carpet muffled our footsteps, but the tension in the air was almost tangible. "Sure, but did something else happen?" I asked, lowering myself onto the couch. The leather creaked beneath me, cool against my skin. Ree settled in the middle, his presence a steady anchor between Claire and me. I could feel Claire's slight trembles through the cushions, aftershocks from our encounter with the lances. I'm sure two of Decathlon's strongest mages don't just pop in to say, hello, I added, trying to keep my voice light despite the worry churning in my stomach. The director's eyes flickered, a storm of emotions passing through them in a split second. She pursed her lips, choosing her words carefully. Nothing for you to be concerned about quite yet. She sat across from us, her robes rustling as she smoothed them. Lance Byron was once a student here, and his brother now attends, so he just brought the news in person. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding back. My eyes darted to Ree, hoping he might have caught something I missed. But his face was a mask of casual indifference, giving nothing away. A familiar frustration bubbled up inside me at his inscrutability. Claire, still riding high on adrenaline and excitement, clasped her hands together. Her eyes were wide and sparkling, a stark contrast to the director's somber mood. Wow. I didn't think I would ever get a chance to see them in person, she breathed, her voice filled with awe and a hint of lingering nervousness. The director's expression softened at Claire's enthusiasm, but there was a sadness in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. It was like watching a cloud pass over the sun. I just wished they came bearing better news, she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. The weight of whatever the lances had brought seemed to press down on her, aging her before our eyes. Catching herself, the director straightened up and waved her hand dismissively, as if trying to physically brush away the gloom. But enough of this, she said, her voice taking on a more businesslike tone, though the strain was still evident. Please tell me what happened. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts before launching into the tale. Starting from the event with Charles and Marquois, who went out after curfew, I went over everything that happened. My voice grew more intense as I described Marquois's odd behavior and erratic mana fluctuation, along with his abnormal magical capabilities. And you're saying that Marquois had bloody symbols engraved down his spine? The director leaned forward, her voice tinged with a rare hint of unease. Her piercing gaze locked onto mine, silently demanding confirmation of the disturbing report. I nodded slowly. Yes, director. It was unlike anything I've seen before, strange, intricate markings carved into his flesh, almost as if they had been etched there by some unseen force. I paused, searching the director's expression for any hint of recognition or understanding. His mana was fluctuating erratically too, spiking and receding in ways that just felt wrong. Ree sighed heavily beside me, the weariness evident in his voice as he leaned back against the plush couch. His usual calm seemed fractured, revealing a glimpse of genuine concern. This isn't the first incident of its kind, Cynthia, and I doubt it will be the last. The director nodded in solemn agreement, her lips drawn into a thin line. The worry lines around her eyes deepened, making her look older than I'd ever seen her. Do you have any ideas about what was wrong with Marquois? I asked, leaning forward, my curiosity and concern battling for dominance. The director's face scrunched up, and she let out a heavy sigh. I wish I did. Neither the medics nor the artificers have figured out what's going on. She nervously tapped her fingers on the couch, creating a soft rhythm that filled the tense silence. We've called in the big guns, the Mages Guild. Hopefully, their researchers can work with Gideon and our team to crack this mystery. Ree raised his eyebrows, his expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. So, all we can do for now is continue our patrols and maintain vigilance? I'm afraid so, the director replied, her voice laced with a hint of frustration. Without a clear understanding of the root cause, there's little we can do beyond enhancing security measures and remaining alert for any further incidents. I watched as the director stood, her posture commanding and unwavering. I trust that you and your team will do everything in your power to ensure the safety of this academy, she said, her gaze sweeping across us. We will increase security patrols and take all necessary precautions to protect our students and staff. The three of us nodded, the gravity of the situation settling heavily upon us as we filed out of the director's office, each lost in our own thoughts. The heavy wooden door closed behind us with a soft thud, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. Ree let out a frustrated sigh, his shoulders slumping as he ran a hand through his tousled hair. The weight of our new responsibilities seemed to press down on him visibly. TCH, just when I thought I could finally relax, he muttered, his brow furrowed in irritation. His eyes, usually bright with mischief, now looked tired and concerned. "I know what you mean," I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It feels like we're always jumping from one crisis to another. Looks like you won't be getting any time off anytime soon, huh?" We turned our heads to see Aaliyah leaning against the wall, with a gentle smile. Her words carried a hint of amusement, underscored by a touch of concern. Ree's shoulders sagged visibly as he let out a deep, weary sigh. His fingers combed through his messy hair, a gesture that spoke volumes about his exhaustion. "It's like a curse sometimes," he admitted, his voice a blend of frustration and resignation. A wry smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, not quite reaching his tired eyes. "Just when you think you've got everything under control. The universe throws you another curveball," I finished for him, sharing a knowing look. Aaliyah's warm chuckle broke the moment, drawing our attention back to her as she approached. Her presence seemed to lighten the atmosphere, like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "I'm glad to see you're both doing well, despite everything," she said, her voice soft with genuine care. "It's been a while since we've caught up." Ree nodded, some of the tension visibly melting from his shoulders at the sight of a familiar, friendly face. "Yeah, it has," he agreed, a note of fondness creeping into his voice. Aaliyah's gaze shifted to Claire, her expression softening further. There was a hint of curiosity in her eyes as she regarded the newcomer. "And you must be Claire. I've heard a lot about you." Claire's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and awe crossing her face. "It's an honor to me, Lance Aaliyah," she said, her voice filled with respect and a touch of nervousness. Aaliyah's laugh was light and airy as she waved her hand dismissively. "Please, just Aaliyah is fine. Any friend of Ree and Art is a friend of mine." Her warm smile seemed to put Claire at ease, the younger girl's shoulders relaxing slightly. Turning back to me and Ree, Aaliyah's expression grew more serious, concern etching lines around her eyes. "So, what kind of trouble have you managed to find this time?" she asked, her tone a mix of worry and resigned amusement, as though accustomed to our knack for attracting trouble. Ree hesitated, clearly debating how much to share. "Just some troublemaking students, nothing to worry about," he said, aiming for nonchalance but not quite hitting the mark. Aaliyah's raised eyebrow and penetrating gaze made it clear she wasn't buying it. Ree squirmed slightly under her look, reminding me of a student caught in a lie by a stern teacher. Finally, he sighed, shoulders slumping in defeat. "There are some students who have bloody symbols engraved down their spines," he admitted, his voice low and troubled. "Apparently, these marks increase their magical abilities, but they go berserk." The change in Aaliyah's demeanor was immediate and stark. Her expression darkened, concern etching deep lines on her forehead. She let out a troubled sigh, her eyes distant as she processed this information. "Bloody symbols that enhance their abilities but cause them to lose control. That sounds like a very dangerous development." She paused, her brow furrowed in deep thought. When she spoke again, her voice was firm with resolve. "I need to tell the council about this." Her gaze softened as she looked at each of us in turn. "I'm glad you three are safe, at least." Ree's response was immediate, his voice taking on a cocky edge that didn't quite mask his underlying worry. "Well, there's no one in the academy who can hurt me, after all." Claire's eyes widened in admiration. "Wow, you're so confident, Captain," she said, her voice filled with awe. Aaliyah chuckled, but there was a hint of exasperation in her eyes. "Confidence is good, but let's not be reckless, Ree," she admonished gently, shooting him a knowing look. Ree raised an eyebrow, but couldn't help cracking a smile at Aaliyah's words. Some of the tension seemed to leave him as he replied, "I'll keep that in mind, Aaliyah. Thanks for the concern." Aaliyah's expression lightened, a warm smile spreading across her face. "So, how about we take a walk around the academy? I haven't had a chance to explore in the last few weeks. While we're at it, let me know how you're doing." Claire, looking suddenly unsure, began to step back. "Oh, then I'll be leaving now," she said, bowing slightly to Aaliyah. She turned to leave, but Aaliyah's voice stopped her. "You can join us too, Claire." Claire turned back, surprise evident on her face. "Oh, I wouldn't want to intrude on your catch-up time," she said, her voice a mix of politeness and uncertainty. Aaliyah's smile was warm and inviting. "Don't worry about it. Just lead the way." As Claire hesitantly began to lead us, Ree and I exchanged a look. A silent conversation passed between us, part amusement at the situation, part relief at the momentary reprieve from our troubles. With matching smiles, we fell into step behind Claire and Aaliyah, ready to enjoy this brief moment of normalcy amidst the chaos. "It's Marquand," Claire said, her voice trembling. She swallowed hard, struggling to get the words out. "Last night, he died." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. I felt my body go numb, my mind reeling as if I'd been physically struck. "What?" I finally croaked out, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the sudden haze clouding my vision. How did he die?" Curtis's face contorted with a mix of grief and frustration. He ran a shaky hand through his hair, his voice strained when he finally spoke. "The medics and artificers, they said Marquand just couldn't stop his mana from leaking out. It was like..." He paused, searching for words. "Like a dam breaking, and they couldn't plug the holes fast enough." "Mana leakage?" I questioned, my brow furrowing deeper as confusion mingled with my shock. "Even though he was unconscious? That doesn't make any sense." Claire nodded grimly, her usually bright eyes now dull with sorrow. It had something to do with those symbols on his back. They were active, somehow, even when he wasn't conscious. The loss of a student was always devastating, but the mysterious circumstances surrounding Marquand's death added a layer of dread to our grief. "What did they find?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I sank into a nearby chair. Kathleen let out a frustrated sigh, her hands clenching and unclenching in her lap. "Little to nothing. And what they did find, they're keeping under wraps." Kai nodded in agreement, his usual calm demeanor tinged with annoyance. "Even their parents are being kept in the dark. It's all very hush-hush." Theodore, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until now, suddenly exploded. "What the hell is the point of having the disciplinary committee if they're going to keep us out of anything remotely important?" His fist slammed onto the table. I glanced at Rimuru, who sat at the head of the table. Despite the tension crackling in the room, he remained outwardly calm, his eyes closed and his right elbow resting on the chair, supporting his head. "Captain." Theodore turned his burning gaze to Rimuru, his voice a mix of plea and demand. Rimuru opened his eyes slowly, his gaze steady and calculating as he addressed Theodore's outburst. "I understand your frustration, Theodore. Believe me, I feel it too. But without knowing what we're up against, our options are limited." Theodore's fists clenched tighter, his knuckles turning white. "But that's exactly the problem, Captain." His voice cracked with emotion. "How are we supposed to protect the students if we're kept in the dark about these threats? We're flying blind here." Rimuru held Theodore's gaze, his voice calm but firm. "I share your concerns. But we must trust that the authorities have their reasons for withholding information at this time. Our job now is to work with what we have. Right now, all we can do is reorganize and strengthen our patrol schedule," Claire said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Rimuru's expression hardened as he looked at each of us in turn. "There's something else you should know," he said, his tone grave. "Since whatever these students are taking strengthens their magical abilities, you are allowed to use your powers without hesitation to subdue them." A collective gasp echoed through the room. I looked around, seeing the shock mirrored on everyone's faces. Claire's usual smile had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Curtis stood rigid, his jaw clenched tight. Rimuru continued, his voice laden with the weight of his next words. "And if it escalates and you cannot control the students or wait for one of us to come to help, I allow you to even injure them, even if it means cutting off a hand." The silence that followed was deafening. My mind reeled, trying to process what Rimuru had just said. This wasn't like him at all. Rimuru, who always put the students first, was now giving us permission to harm them. The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Claire was the first to break the silence. "Captain." Her voice trembled, a mix of shock and distress. "But Captain, are you sure about this? Injuring students? It just doesn't sit right." Her hands were shaking slightly, and I could see the conflict in her eyes, torn between her duty and her desire to protect. Rimuru's gaze remained steady, his expression unwavering. "I understand your hesitation, Claire. But we are facing a threat we do not fully understand. The safety of the academy and its students must come first, even if it means taking drastic measures." Curtis, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His voice was low and controlled, but I could feel the tension underlying his words. "We get it, Captain. We need to protect everyone here. I just hope it doesn't come to that. His fists were clenched at his sides, knuckles white with the effort of containing his emotions. Rimuru responded, Curtis's concerns. Let us hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. We will do everything in our power to keep the academy safe. I stepped out of the DC room, a wave of relief washing over me. Rimuru's sudden takeover of the mana manipulation class had gifted me with unexpected free time, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and relief. While I appreciated the break, a nagging voice in my head reminded me of the serious situation we were facing. The academy grounds greeted me with soft morning light, a stark contrast to the tension I'd left behind in the DC room. Students bustled about, their laughter and chatter creating a soothing backdrop. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering unease from our earlier meeting. As I wandered aimlessly, my mind drifted back to Rimuru's words. The permission to use force against students, it didn't sit right with me. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the familiar weight settling on my shoulder. Turning my head, I met Sylvie's mischievous gaze. Her vibrant eyes were filled with joy, a welcome distraction from my troubled thoughts. Hello there, little troublemaker, I gasped, my mood instantly lightened. How are you today? Sylvie's tail swished happily as she replied, I'm good, uncle, just looking for some fun. I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. Where are Seal and Sylvia? Aren't they keeping an eye on you? Sylvie's expression turned sheepish. Well, I was with Ellie, but the director started teaching her some boring theory stuff. I didn't get it, so I snuck out for a snack. I raised an eyebrow, torn between amusement and concern. Sneaking out, huh? You're going to get me in trouble one of these days. But uncle, Sylvie pouted, you're way more fun than boring lessons. I laughed, shaking my head. All right. How about we head to the cafeteria? I haven't had breakfast yet, and it sounds like you could use a proper meal too. Sylvie's eyes lit up. Yes, let's get lots of meat. As we made our way to the cafeteria, I couldn't help but marvel at how Sylvie's presence had lifted my spirits. The weight of our earlier meeting seemed lighter now, replaced by the simple joy of spending time with this mischievous little dragon. The cafeteria was relatively quiet, with only a few early risers scattered about. As we picked out our food, I tried to sneak some vegetables onto Sylvie's plate. Hey, she protested, I see what you're doing, uncle. I grinned, come on, Sylvie. You know your dad would want you to eat a balanced meal. How about we make a deal? You try a bit of everything, and we'll make sure you get extra meat tomorrow? Sylvie considered this for a moment, her little face scrunched up in thought. Okay, she finally agreed, but only because it's you asking, uncle. So, how's your training going? I asked, genuinely curious about my niece's progress. I'd been so caught up in my own responsibilities lately that I felt a twinge of guilt for not checking in more often. Sylvie's eyes lit up, and she swallowed her mouthful of food before responding eagerly. It's going really well, uncle. Mama Sylvia said that I'll be able to achieve the Realm Heart soon. She thinks I'm making great progress. I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. That's fantastic, Sylvie. The Realm Heart is no small feat. She nodded vigorously, then added with a slight pout, but Mama Seal is a bit harsh. She's made me practice my mana control exercises even more lately. She says it's super important to have precise control, especially when we're training for the Realm Heart. I chuckled, imagining Ciel's stern face as she put Sylvie through her paces. That sounds like Ciel, all right. But you know she only pushes you because she cares, right? I know, Sylvie sighed, then perked up again. Oh, and guess what else? Mama Seal is teaching me swordsmanship too. She said I should learn to use my human body more, but, she trailed off, looking a bit sheepish. But what? I prompted gently. Well, I'm really bad at using a sword, she admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. I keep dropping it or swinging it wrong. Mama Seal says I'll get better with practice, but sometimes I worry. She paused, her expression turning serious. I don't want to disappoint them. Or you and Papa. I want to make you all proud. My heart squeezed at her words. I reached out and gently patted her head, feeling the softness of her fur under my palm. Oh, Sylvie, I said softly, you could never disappoint us. We're already so proud of you and all the progress you've made. I thought about how far she'd come, From the tiny dragon I'd first met to this determined young girl sitting before me. It was amazing to witness her growth, both in her abilities and her character. Just keep being your amazing self, I continued, and that's all that matters. We love you for who you are, not just what you can do. Sylvie's face lit up with a beaming smile, and snuggled closer to me. Thank you, Uncle, I'll do my best, I promise. Sylvie, who perched on my shoulder, let out a small, dramatic sigh that tickled my ear. Her tail drooped a bit, mirroring my own reluctance to end our time together. I could sense her disappointment, and it made my heart ache a little. Do we have to, Uncle? She asked, her voice taking on that irresistible pleading tone that always made my resolve waver. I felt my determination crumbling under the weight of her adorable request. I chuckled, reaching up to gently scratch behind her ears. Her purr of contentment was almost enough to make me give in. Almost. I wrestled with my desire to make her happy and my responsibility to get her back to Ellie. Well, I said, pretending to consider it seriously, though inside I was already planning our detour, I suppose we could take the scenic route back. How about a stroll through the gardens? Sylvie's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Her tail perked up, swishing happily, and I could practically feel the excitement radiating off her. Her joy was infectious, and I felt my own spirits lifting in response. Yes, please, she chirped, nuzzling my cheek affectionately. I love the gardens in the morning. Everything smells so fresh. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself grinning as we left the cafeteria. The warm sunlight hit our faces as we stepped outside, and Sylvie let out a delighted little squeal. I felt a surge of happiness at her simple pleasure, grateful for these uncomplicated moments of joy. As we walked, Sylvie chattered away about the different flowers we passed, showing off her growing knowledge. I listened attentively, my chest swelling with pride at how much she'd learned. Each fact she shared made me marvel at her intelligence and curiosity. Our pace was leisurely, neither of us in a hurry to end this moment. It was a welcome respite from the chaos of yesterday, a peaceful interlude that I knew we both needed. I found myself reflecting on the events of the past day, feeling a mix of relief at our safety and lingering concern about what might come next. Uncle? Sylvie's voice suddenly turned serious, catching my attention and pulling me from my thoughts. Yes, Sylvie? Thank you, she said softly, her eyes shining with genuine gratitude, for breakfast, and for always making time for me. I really love our time together. Her words hit me right in the heart, filling me with a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. I felt a lump form in my throat, touched by her sincerity and overwhelmed by my own feelings of love and protectiveness. I reached up, gently cradling her small form in my hands and bringing her down to eye level. I wanted her to see the truth in my eyes as I spoke. Sylvie, I said, my voice thick with emotion, I love our time together too, more than you know. I felt my eyes prickling with unshed tears, struck by how much this little dragon meant to me. It was nice to walk around with Sylvie and have some quiet moments, after what happened yesterday. I found myself savoring every second, storing away these peaceful memories to draw strength from in whatever challenges lay ahead.